My aunt, Lori Smith Camp, gave a TEDx talk in her hometown of Omaha, Nebraska in 2013. It was titled Wolves and Brownies, and it explored the different ways ethics are instilled in boys and girls. My Aunt Lori was a trailblazer. In 2001, President George W. Bush nominated her to be a federal judge, the first female federal judge in Nebraska history. Her original confirmation date was September 11th of 2001. She was unanimously confirmed by the Senate on October 23rd, 2001, and she served on the federal bench for 19 years, 7 as chief judge. In 2020, Lori was in conversation with her good friend and colleague, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and they were talking about ways that they could commemorate the centennial of the 19th Amendment, which legally guarantees women the right to vote. On September 18th of 2020, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, and 3 days later, Lori recorded and posted to YouTube a video tribute to her life. Just 2 days later, on September 23rd of 2020, my Aunt Lori passed away, peacefully in her sleep. She was 66 years old. Lori is my mom's little sister, but many people mistook them for twins. Lori is on the left, and my mom, Kay Smith Bruce, is on the right. This was during a trip they took together to Seattle just a couple weeks before Lori passed away. They hiked, they talked, and I'm so glad that they got to spend that time together. As memorials streamed in from across the country for Lori, several people said Lori Smith Camp was the Ruth Bader Ginsburg of Nebraska. I like to think that RBG was the Lori Smith Camp of the Supreme Court. Both worked tirelessly on behalf of women's rights and the rights of other disenfranchised people. Lori was a passionate supporter of the legacy of Chief Standing Bear, who in 1879 successfully argued in federal court that Native Americans are persons under the law. I remember her telling me the story of Chief Standing Bear when I was a child, and it captivated me. It caught my imagination because I pictured a standing bear, which is a formidable sight. At full stretch, an adult standing bear can reach upwards of 9 feet in the air. California, right next to the Los Padres National Forest, there are black bears there and grizzly bears. There were until the 1920s, like the one on the California state flag. The local tribe in Santa Barbara, where I grew up, is the Chumash, and they revered bears. Every year, members of the tribe would come to my grade school for a sage ceremony. We would sing songs that would celebrate the 4 directions. Bear represents the north, the winter season, and death. The great eagle soars above the land, and if it spots danger, it alerts the bear. The bear is the protector of the land. No creature is stronger. Knowing that, when my dad, my brother, and I went fishing in my dad's home state of Wyoming, we always brought cowbells with us. We wanted to alert any bears that might be along the riverbank that we were there to catch our limit of rainbow and brookies and brownies. But mostly, we were there to be with each other, surrounded by elk and moose and bison and bears. In 2002, when my dad passed away, I started biking a lot. I was just 23 years old, but I had learned to bike as a child. I remember my mom taking me to a church parking lot. It's the first time I felt that sense of balance. I was safe. I wasn't going to fall. I felt free. I could keep biking forever. My brother and I would bike 10, sometimes 15 miles to go visit friends in town, or to play tennis, or maybe to pick up a VHS tape for $1 from Starland Video and take it home with us to watch that night. We grew up riding these bikes. This is a Specialized Hard Rock, my first bike. I would tell you it's a hardtail bike, but all bikes back then were hardtail. Full suspension had not gone mainstream yet. We grew up on top of a hill, so we got used to changing gears, and we got used to sucking in as much of the dry, earthy California air as we could in every breath. During high school, when I was having a tough time, I turned to the bike. I would hop on, and I would hammer on the pedals as hard as I could, from my boarding school dorm room to a park or to the tennis courts. And I had to be careful when I arrived, because I would get there and I'd be dizzy. My heart would be beating throughout my entire body. like the drum beat that the Shumash had in the sage ceremony. And years later, when my dad died, I got my first road bike, and I immediately took it up the steepest, hardest mountains in Santa Barbara. 4,000 feet and 13 miles, grades of 18 to 20%. I was sad and angry. I cried and yelled. Mostly, I tired myself out so that I could make peace with the world. And about a year later, after completing a series of centuries and double century rides, I raced my bicycle across Death Valley in the Furnace Creek 508, finishing in 35 hours and 7 minutes. My crew was my brother, my future wife, my best friend from college and my future business partner and his wife, and my 2 best biking buddies from Santa Barbara. The ride was epic. It was cathartic. I thought a lot about my dad on that ride. I think a lot when I ride the bike. It's really no surprise to me that Einstein said he conceived the theory of relativity while riding his bicycle. It's been 20 years, and I'm still riding the bike. Thankfully, we live in one of the best areas of the country for riding bikes. It's also one of the best areas of the country for seeing bears. We're just down the street from the most visited national park in the country. It's not Yosemite in my home state of California, famous for its epic waterfalls and Half Dome and El Capitan. And it's not Yellowstone in my dad's home state of Wyoming, famous for its mud pots and geysers. The most visited national park is the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which also happens to be the most biodiverse national park. It has the greatest variety of salamanders in the world, 200 species of birds, 68 species of mammals, 67 native fish species, 43 species of amphibians, 39 species of reptiles, and synchronous fireflies that blink in unison in the late spring. Now, the most visited part of the most visited national park in the country is Cades Cove. And if you ask some of the many visitors that visit, the reason that they're there to bike or to walk or to drive the 11-mile loop around Cades Cove is to see a bear. There are 1,500 bears in the Smokies, about 2 for every square mile. I saw these 3 last summer. Now this is where they get the signal from mom that it's time to come back and run across the road to join her. I was on a bike ride and I was captivated watching these 3 frolic. About 2 weeks later, my friend Pete and I were riding on Rich Mountain Road, and a black bear dropped down out of a tree, landing next to us alongside the road. Now you can see bears any time of year in East Tennessee. Bears don't hibernate here like they do in colder climates like Alaska. Bears here tend to den high above ground in hollowed out trees, and they enter into a deep sleep in winter, but they'll still move about if they're disturbed or if they sense a warming trend. For example, I saw this print last winter. For context, you can see just above it my shoe. I wear a size 15, so that gives you a sense this is a pretty good sized bear. In winter, bears are about my size. In summer, they can grow to be twice as big. This past summer, I saw bears on 4 consecutive rides on Parsons Branch, the Foothills Parkway, East Miller's Cove, and Bluff Mountain. I did a sunrise ride to get to the top of Bluff Mountain and the fire tower. It's one of my favorite rides. And after completing the climb, I was heading down the invigorating descent, going around the curves 30, sometimes 40 miles an hour. And that's when I saw a flash, a big black bear. And that was the moment we collided. Oh no, I thought. I didn't even have time to reflexively hit the brakes. I'm going way too fast for this to just be a normal accident. Next thing I knew, scenery was flying by. Guardrail, trees, pavement. I was sliding down the road backward and fast. When I finally came to a stop, I was laying out in the middle of the road, staring up at the clear blue sky. It was quiet and still and peaceful. I'm okay, I thought. And then I said it out loud, I think to confirm it. I'm okay. The sense of relief and amazement and gratitude. I immediately knew it was going to be one of the happiest moments of my life because I was still alive. I was going to see my family that night. I was going to hug my kids. Then I did the system check. I could move my head, my arms and my hands worked. I think I can stand up. And when I stood up, I looked at my leg because I thought something was wrong. I saw all the road rash and I thought, well, that makes sense and it could be worse. So I figured I'd give myself 5 or 10 minutes to settle my nerves and then I'd finish the ride. Because I always finish the ride. I've ridden through 115-degree heat. I've ridden through the snow, torrential rainpour, hurricane warnings, tornado warnings. The only time I've had to get picked up from a ride is due to mechanical failure. The time I was riding and my handlebar snapped in half, the time I broke off a pedal. I walked up about 50 feet up the road to retrieve my bike, which is named Big Red on account of its size, 63 centimeters, and its bright red color. And I immediately realized this was going to be one of those rides that I got picked up from. The steel frame was bent and broken in 3 places. Big Red and I had ridden thousands of epic miles together, but this was going to be our last ride. I carried Big Red to the side of the road and leaned it up against a tree, and that's when I realized there was bear poop on the wheels. The impact, the collision with the bear had literally knocked the poop out of the bear. And that quickly became my kids' favorite part of the story. Poop adds a little bit of levity to a freak accident that could have been much worse. When I went into the ER, the doctor asked me, on a scale of 1 to unbearable, what's your pain level? And that began the process of hearing every bear joke and every bear pun over the last 4 months. My friend Andy sent me this photo. We hike a lot together that he took recently in Shenandoah National Park, bear collision area. And it reminded me of a backpacking trip my brother and I took in the Shenandoah 15 years ago, and we saw a big mother bear easily turn over this massive log to find grubs to eat underneath, and her 4 cubs dropped down from a tree to join her. It was amazing. The night of the accident, we went to watch the One Knox professional soccer team. We wanted to catch the first playoff game, and we didn't want my broken leg and 2 broken bones in my foot to stop us. Now, we had to cancel a lot of plans in the second half of 2022, but we did have a family bike ride planned for 2 days after the accident, and thankfully, my wife and kids still did the ride while I cheered them on. And afterwards, we went to brunch at the Dancing Bear Appalachian Bistro. And I remember sitting there with my leg propped up on another chair, and I was awestruck as I looked up and I watched the early morning light come down through the trees and the breeze rustling the leaves. There was aroma coming from the kitchen, the sound of the live mountain music, a trio, guitar, banjo, mandolin, and the smiles on all of our faces. I'm so thankful to still be here. I'm so thankful to be able to keep riding bikes. And as for bears, I believe as the Shumash do. They're the protectors of the land. No creature is stronger. And I'm very thankful that bears are here to delight us, to surprise us, to scare us, to remind us that there are things in the world bigger than ourselves, in a world full of death and sorrow and tears, but also full of love and joy and smiles. Thank you.